Hello, everyone. It's Martha Novak, and this is a show called Real Talk with Martha Novak. I'm so glad that we are together today. I took last week off because I had some visitors up here, and now we're back for the long term. Anyway, I'm looking forward to working with you. We are talking about something I think extremely important, which is how you self-sabotage your happiness. I think this is an important thing to talk about. This is something that, and by the way, we have heard through the news, of course, that we're being bombarded with solar stuff today. You know, the radiation, the whatever is coming at us because there was a sunburst or something. I don't know how our internet's going to hold out today, so it's going to be really interesting to see. I already saw the Facebook freeze for a moment, but it's back. It didn't take but a fraction of a second, so we'll see, okay? And for some reason, if we miss today's lesson, it will always be next week, right? I hope you guys are doing well. It's an interesting time right now, and you remember that something that I said a long time ago, and I've said it several times, chaos is supposed to reign in the world right now. There's a spiritual reason for it. We're going to be arguing for a long time because the things that we relied on and that we want to have work the same way it always did, from our businesses to the family to religion to whatever we have put our faith in through the years, is changing, and there's a big reason for it. The big reason is this is the time of individual consciousness, and you're supposed to look within. The life within is supposed to be stronger than the outside, right? And yet we've just been reared to look outside, haven't we? I mean, we had an outside God when we grew up, if we had any God at all. We had, the company was going to take care of us. Our parents were supposed to take care of us. Everybody, we had that child's mentality. And now it's not about that anymore. It is about consciousness and the deepening of it. It's not about survival anymore. It's about finding out who you are, using your talents, gifts, and abilities, adding value to this place called our world, and I certainly hope you'll do it. Now, I'm going to go back and say, I want to talk about one thing that we mentioned last week. There's short-term success and there's long-term success. Short-term and long-term success. We're listening to this program today, and we're going to do our prayer so that we can really open to this, to understand how sometimes what we're reaching for in terms of short-term success is actually sabotaging our long-term success. In other words, it's immediate fix that makes us feel good, right? Like fantasy. But in the end, it's one of the blocks to really practically using our talents, gifts, and abilities, adding value, and going on and succeeding in whatever it is you want to do. It's an important thing for us to start talking about, right? Okay, now, short-term success, a fix, long-term success, what'll really make you happy in life. That's the part I want you to get right now, okay? And I want you to be thinking about it throughout the talk that we have today about this very subject. All right, let's do a prayer. Dear God, thank you so much for all of us being together today again. We are so grateful to have all our friends about us and to talk about a really important subject. And we thank you so much now as we open ourselves to see, hear, sense, and know what you would have us do as we open to the truth that lies in your enlightenment. We thank you so much, dear God, and we say, absolutely, we declare we know nothing, for it is the you through us and through all things that know it all, and that can give us the larger perspective, so that everything fits into our life as the perfect whole, and we don't focus on what we lack and the negative and what we didn't have as children. Those times have passed. The now is here to make the most of. We open ourselves to that, dear God, and the message you have for us today concerning all of this, our next steps. And we thank you and say this prayer in your name, in the name of the Ascended Masters, our love-centered guides and friends, and in the name of everyone listening to the show today. Thank you. And so it is. Amen. Okay. Quick review. Now remember what I said before. I want you to be thinking of these things as short-term fixes, which disguise themselves as blocks. Short-term fixes that disguise themselves as blocks to your ultimate happiness. They are coping mechanisms, if you will, darlings. Do you understand? They're coping mechanisms, and we do these things instead of getting on with it because nobody's taught us how to get on with it. This isn't all, it doesn't all lead back to the parents. Certainly, there are parents that never taught their children. Certainly, there are parents that never did any of this themselves, so they didn't know even the language to tell you about it. But a lot of this is just about how you survived and whether you are going to use that energy now to create with instead of survive, you see. At one point, nobody tells us, I'm telling you, but nobody usually tells us that our energy must switch from the survival energy, which was important up until you were 7 years old. It switches now to creative energy. Somewhere along the way, you've got to stop having your priority being survival. You have survived. Now it's time to see what you've got and be the steward for marvelous talents, gifts, and abilities that lie within. And speaking as what happened to me, you may not even know some of them. As you go deeper and deeper and deeper and open up and have a real transition ultimately, you're going to find things that you never knew before. Quite the miracle. It isn't that, now you see how old Judeo-Christian teaching says, we have earned it by being, what? Good little boys and girls. That's a God, kind of like a Santa Claus that bestows things because you're a good little girl and boy. Guys, that's not true, okay? You have these things all of a sudden that you become aware of because you've opened to them. They've always been there in you. But we don't know it till we go on the journey, you see. Wow. So, with that in mind as well, I want to simply read and by the way, this is I'm taking this lecture from a wonderful article I read on the internet. I often read things on the internet and have to change them quite a lot. I'm not changing this too much. I mean, I'm adding a lot, of course, because that's what I'm supposed to do. But this was a very good article in its own right. It was by Nancy Carbone, Carbone, 12 Common Ways People Self-Sabotage Their Own Happiness. So, let me just catch you up if you missed last week, 2 weeks ago. The first one was they externalized their feelings by thinking life is against them. They externalize their feelings by thinking life is against them. Wow. Guys, that's an important one to get through. That really can be a core belief. You know, if you didn't have supportive parents, if you had parents and siblings that actually worked against you, you had probably generalized that to the whole world. But is it true? No, it's not. And your rational mind, your mental body, is actually there to say, no, that's not true. Of course, it's silly. It's the emotional body that carries the weight in this case, though. And there's a lot of energy that goes into that in the emotional body. We have 4 bodies, mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual, as you know, that we work with in our dynamic here. And what we're working on primarily, and what these shows are often about, is there's too much energy in the emotional body, too much energy, a kind of energy that shouldn't be there. Hi, Peter. Hello, darling. I'm glad that you're with us today. A whole bunch of you are clicking in now. I'm very glad that you're here. Here's what I want to say. The things that belong in your emotional body are things like unconditional love. Yes, you're capable of that. Don't believe it, what they're telling you in the world. That is a phrase that is knocked around way too much. Unconditional love, as if we could all reach that. Honey, that is a gift of consciousness. That is a gift that you have when you go deeper, okay? I think this whole thing about, we should all love each other unconditionally is so much fantasy. And it really mitigates the real meaning of that. That is that's born of really this deep peace within when you get there. So it comes from the deepening of consciousness. So love and unconditional love are both in this emotional body by its nature, by the way. Awe of how the system works, the system of God. Forgiveness, compassion, joy. There are things that have their nature there. But it's loaded down with things like the world is against me. Life is against me. Life is a struggle. I hate my father. My mother's a critical bitch. All these things that bring up emotion in us live in that emotional body too, in an unhealthy way. This is the ego child's mind that has created beliefs that we must get beyond. They're all puffs of air. They're based on appearances when we were a kid because we couldn't fathom anything but us. That's what a child does. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's what a child does. It's not what an adult does, you see? So the child, let's say, tries to explore their talents and writes a wonderful essay for their first or second grade class, and the teacher says it's just great and you're gifted, and your father won't even look up from his work and he doesn't even acknowledge it. Your mother, who doesn't believe in education at all because she never was very good at it, discounts it. You understand what you do with it then, don't you? If enough of that happens, you don't believe in yourself. And because this is all about you, then this becomes usually one of two things: a relentless search for your parents' approval, which won't ever come, especially because a lot of times they've moved off the planet and you're still doing that because you brought in substitutes like a boss, right? like your colleagues at work. Or you are going to bury those things so deeply and say they're no good because you didn't get their attention, and that's when you're going to go out and never use your talents, gifts, and abilities, never explore them, never find out who you really are in those aspects. You're going to take jobs that bore you to death and that don't use all your gifts, you see? So what was really true here? That you're no good? Because that's the base of this, right? Or was it that you had clueless parents? A mother who didn't care about higher education because she was ashamed of her own because she didn't have it. She may have thought she was not smart. A father who worked all the time and was scared to death about life and didn't have time for some of the really important things like supporting their child. Now that's just an example, isn't it? But the fact is the world is filled with stories like this. And we're believing them because we haven't thought through all the details. And we haven't necessarily gone on the journey. Why? Because, well, your parents didn't. And up until a point, you go, your life is what theirs is. Your relationships are what theirs were. Time to do something else. So the second point we've already been through, I'm just trying to add a little bit here. You know, sometimes when I'm doing these shows, I just go with what I'm given that I'm supposed to say to you. So it's always going to be a little different if I'm talking about even the same subject, right? Okay. Number 2, and let me finish one thought about this, the thinking that they externalize their feelings by thinking life is against them. I had a very wise mother, and my mother at one point said, people are going to think about you what you think about yourself. And I thought, somehow I remember that really well. I remember it into my adulthood. We have to find ourselves and start. Hello, Angelica. So nice that you're joining us this morning. I just love your name, by the way. It's beautiful. So, welcome. Guys, oh, thank you so much, Angelica. You know, I did have a good rest. The thing is, I had a dear friend who is from Atlanta, but she's, thank you, but she's moving up here to the mountains. Woo! She's not moving to my area, but she's moving about 45 minutes away. So it was really important that we go and meet her agent and see some houses and, you know, that kind of thing. So that's where I was and what I was doing. I love your company too, darling. So, going back to what we were saying, and what my mom said. You know, my mother also had a phrase. I think it's so funny. I don't know why I'm talking about her this morning, except to say she had a phrase which was, put this in your brain pan. Put this in your brain pan. So I've used that ever since. Let's put this in our brain pan. In other words, hold this thought that you must be able to do to find out who you are. This is the time in your life, if you're listening to a show like this, it's time to find out who you are and make the most of that. That's what you've got, right? That's what you've been given. And so now it's very important to use it well and to learn how, if we have not learned in our early childhood homes. And then to think, as an offshoot of that, to think better of yourself. Because how you think of yourself is how others will think about you. That's just the truth. Okay? So the number 2 point was when Angelica said, I don't know what you mean. Hope I can do that one day. Oh, move to the mountains? Is that what you mean? Come on. I'd love to have you. I think it'd be great. It's really nice. There are so many people that are kind and of like minds. And in these small towns, I was reared in Atlanta and New York. So in these small towns, there is a different attitude about things. And that is that we help each other here, It's a kind of attitude about, got it. Thank you, Angelica. It's an attitude of, let's go help the neighbor raise the barn attitude. And it's very sweet to have that kind of experience where neighbors stick together and help each other. All right, back to talking about self-sabotage. So I'm simply right now reading and going off on tangents, of course, to talk about some of the things we talked about last week. Number 2, they do not trust or support themselves. Guys, unless you know what you're developing and what your talents and gifts and abilities might be, or who you are on a deeper level, you don't kind of know what to support, do you? There's so much to find out about ourselves. I mean, are you an introvert or an extrovert? That I was talking about to somebody about that this week. I happen to be a really big introvert. Now listen, what introvert and extrovert means is introverts are people that get energy from being alone. Extroverts are people that get energy from other people. One of the reasons I don't look like an introvert is I take that time that I need, right? And then I can use my extroverted self. But it's extremely important to know what you are, and it's on a sliding scale. Now, I'm kind of an extreme, but there are people that are in the middle. If this is a 0 introvert to a 10 extrovert, introvert to extrovert. And if you're a 5 or 6, you better find out every moment what you need, because you'll need to be with people. Sometimes you'll need to be alone sometimes, and you have to honor that, and you have to learn to do that, because there ain't a parent in the world is talking to their kid like this. What do you want besides what, past what you think you should be doing? You see? Who are you down there? And who are you in this moment? What do you want? What do you need that you need to provide for yourself? Intense. We've got a learning curve here, because all of that's so important. Now, oh my God, there's so much more than that we have to know about you. Your gifts and talents and abilities, and how much you need to, what direction you need to go with those, right? Okay. Number 3. People who self-sabotage go along with what others think rather than thinking for themselves. And I know in my own case, when I was younger, this bothered me. I used to say to myself, where's your opinion? Now, my husband would probably tell you these days, she's got a little too many. But the whole point is, you gotta drill down and find out who you are, babes. You do. And part of who you are, part of this marvelous divine package that God has given you, that we need to find and develop, is your ideas about things. Your ideas about things. Now, let's talk about your ideas about things in a different aspect. They need to be your ideas about things in the clearest aspect possible. That means they can't be necessarily your ideas about things born of your issues. People talk to me about politics sometimes in my sessions. And I said, it really doesn't matter how you vote, as long as you are not voting for or against mother or father, you see. You're not looking for somebody to take care of you. You're just looking for that clear channel of who in my heart do I really believe. But it has to be divorced from your issues. Who is going to be the very best person for the job? You see? So when we say, start thinking for yourself, I'm not talking about thinking for yourself born of your issues. I get real tickled because when people start the journey and they haven't had a voice and they're trying to add the voice, they'll go, I have to speak my truth. And the fact is, no, you don't. You just don't. Nope, not in that energy, you don't. That's the energy of the ego child's mind that knows that you're trying to do something else and grow past the ego child's mind. So it gives you that phrase. So you'll think you're going along with your highest self when you're still in ego. That ego child's mind is the only one that's adamant like that. Oh, I have to say my truth. No, that's just dominance. You don't have to say your truth. You can be quiet sometimes and still know what you believe. You see? The reason this is called, all of this that we're talking about, the esoteric journey, is there are hidden things like that. The same words can mean something quite different because what matters is what mind is saying it, what mind is thinking it, what mind is feeling it, and what mind is propelling you to act. Is it the ego child's mind, the part of you that thinks like a child, that is in lack? Or is it the highest self mind that is love-based and knows that God has you and that everything's working out as it should and that you are very active in doing whatever you need to do that God tells you to do? All right. Number 4. They set self-limiting beliefs. No, they let self-limiting beliefs control their choices and actions. Yeah, and I put something on the table last week, I'm going to say again, which is a marvelous mantra, I think, for the living experience, which is right action, perfect time. Why do you need to push if you're making a priority, right action, perfect time? And by the way, this is not your perfect time. This is the highest self's perfect time, the God in you's perfect time, because you don't know the perfect time. You and I don't know that. We don't know how something is going to be created. Our job is to want it. That's it. And then get out of the way, have faith, know, right action, perfect time, do whatever we need to do to get ready, whether it is study or whether it's take some other classes that are artistic classes or just sit down and write or sell one house so you can buy another when the time comes, or pack up, or whatever you are feeling in your clarity that you must do. Right action, perfect time. We all have self-limiting beliefs. The point here is, you're going to live like that? How's that working out for you? Okay. Guys, beliefs are puffs of air. They were formed because of repetition in our childhood and because we based our perceptions on appearances back then, and because everything was all about us. All right? But are those the ultimate truth for you? See, I think they're truths with a little t's, and they're truths with a great big T. Great big T. And again, what that reflects, that lowercase, uppercase letter, reflects what mind are you in. And this can be very tricky, because the first thing I always do with people is I try to have them see the difference between the ego child's mind, thinking and feeling and doing, and the higher self, thinking, feeling, and doing. They're completely different. They're motivated by different things. Again, the ego child's mind comes from lack. It's the absence of God thinking according to its understanding of God. The highest mind sees the abundance of God everywhere. Now, the reason that consciousness work is important is because this is your journey from the ego child's mind to the highest self mind. This is the quest, you know? The higher mind, the Holy Grail in all of us, truly. Angelica was just saying that she lived on the beach for 14 years. That's very, very nice, darling. And because of the pandemic, she came back to the city. You know, the opposite is true here. And Angelica, what happened is there was a great influx of people into these high mountains because they thought there was less of the COVID-19 here. So there's been a great influx of people in our small communities in the mountains. Well, that's great. She was saying that she plays the guitar. That's wonderful. Yeah. Well, good for you, darling. That's a wonderful thing. I think, you know, the pandemic, when we look back on it, now, I'm not saying this is everybody, but I am seeing a lot of people, instead of going through the depressions, have created something. And you certainly found that. So good for you. And that's really important. This is a great time to develop ourselves, isn't it? Or develop something, or write something, or learn to play the guitar, you know. All right. I think it's been very hard for extroverts, this pandemic, and the quarantine. I think it's been very good for introverts, quite frankly. So, anyway. All right. So that was number 4. They let self-limiting beliefs control their choices and actions. Well, you've got to know what those self-limiting beliefs are to get on the other side of them, don't you? We got to have a place to start to fix that. So all of a sudden it becomes, let's explore what you believe about every subject. Who you are. You, essentially. God, mother, dad, family, dogs, cats, animals in general, wildlife, nature. Who are you? You see? Number 5 was they want to be rescued. Guys, nobody's going to rescue you but you. Isn't that something? We can spend our lives and our energy running around trying to find somebody to rescue us. The fact is we all have something to give to each other. And that's very nice, but that's not, absolutely not at the expense of somebody doing for themselves. We must do everything we can for ourselves. And then if we don't understand something, we can seek help. But nobody's going to come along and save you. Only you. Nobody's going to come along and save you. You understand? You must save yourself. We are not born knowing how to do that. And yet I talk to a lot of people who are ashamed they don't know how to do that. And it's like, why be ashamed of that? That's something that we're supposed to learn. But the ego child's mind already believes they're lacking. They're wrong. They're not good enough. Nobody cares about me. I'll never get what I want. I'm not enough. Welcome to the ego child's mind, guys. And so they grow up in a world, and they have that, it's just a constant running around trying to find somebody to save them because they can't save themselves. Now, what do I mean by saving myself? Okay, I'm not physical. If somebody who was great big, they could subdue me physically. I'm not going to put myself in that position to have that happen. But I can think myself out of almost any situation, and I know who to call if I don't understand something. That's using your smarts, kids. Okay? I had to learn, like you, how to work through problems in my adulthood. I wasn't born knowing that, but I know it now. You have to learn these things. There's nothing wrong with you that you don't know these things. Nobody taught you. You might not have even entertained the idea there was a different world other than the ego, child's mind, and running from person to person to person to person trying to get somebody to save you. But here it is. We're all born with the ability to look after ourselves in a wholesome way. Now, if you think you don't, it's time to have some work done to convince you that, yes, indeed, you could do this. And here's the thing. The ego child's mind thinks that kind of responsibility is burdensome and horrible and, oh my God, and they dramatize it. I'm here to tell you that the other side of the coin is this. You wouldn't have it any other way as a conscious person, because if I create something, I can create something else, and I can create something else. I'm the creator of all of this. And if I denied that I was the creator of all of this, the God in me, when I align with that we can create everything, if I deny that part of me, I'm really in the ego child's mind. And the child doesn't really create anything. Not anything substantial. Because it's in lack. It's that lack energy. Okay, moving along. Number 6, and this was where we stopped last week, was they are all things to everyone else except themselves. Oh, I know people like this, and so do you. People that run around and find, they're very busy, by the way, and they find something wrong with just about everyone, which makes them feel better about themselves. Problem is, for every person that is worse than them, there are people that are better than them that they're jealous of. This isn't about anybody else. Never will be, never has been. You've just made it about everybody else. And if indeed this is the age of individual consciousness and everything has to do with your journey and going from the ego child's mind and the lack and the fear to the highest self mind and the love and that energy of beneficence, then it's going to be really important that you start looking at you. It begins and ends with you. Everything that you create. So if you deny that and you still make yourself the victim, guys, the victim doesn't create anything. The victim's the kid. Now, nor do I want 180 degrees the other way. I'm no victim, I'm the warrior. Are you? Forget it. These archetypes are steps along the way, yeah, but they're all fantasy. You're not a warrior. You work at an insurance company. Come on. You're just learning to be who you are and speak up and enjoy life and stop self-sabotaging you. You see? We're going to a world inside you that is loving and peaceful and smart and discerning. And by the way, powerful. Not in a domineering way, but in an empowering way, because you are who you are. And as that is the higher self, the channel for the ascended God, you are. You can't, here I go again, cussing. Peter called me on this once before. But you can't bullshit your way through this, kids. This is real. This is reality. This authentic being that you are. You can't pretend this. All right, now let's start into the new material. Number 7 is they compromise or sacrifice themselves to please others. It's true. What was her name again? Sorry, Nancy Carbone. Nancy Carbone goes on to say, I'll read what she said, and then I'll launch off as I do. You feel bad about yourself when you're not focused on pleasing others, so you do what is right for them, not necessarily what's right for you. You end up going against yourself to avoid feeling abandoned. That's a big word here. You save others at the expense of yourself. You feel guilty or bad focusing on yourself and doing what is right for you, thinking others will abandon you. Somehow you believe that putting yourself out there will resort to feeling worse about yourself. That's a strange sentence. You think you will fail, get rejected, or you will be judged. So you might do things that compromise yourself or sacrifice your own needs in order to feel good and loved. Yes, I've got a million stories that clients have told me about this. The clients that give up their lives for their spouse because their spouses are quite different with different focus. The clients that have never learned to handle conflict ever, so they will do anything to keep their wife or their husband from yelling and screaming and going off the deep end and having a fit. The client that actually will say to the narcissist that she's married to, you're right, you're absolutely right, I am absolutely nothing, I don't have a bit of sense in my head, I am absolutely nothing, you're the great one in this house. Guys, these things happen. This is a tremendous sabotage of self. See, you deserve to be happy. You deserve to have peace. Not that there is any deserving. This is, the word deserve is an ego child's mind concept. I want to put that on the table. But when I say you deserve these things, it's because they're innately in you. They're inside of you already. So you own them. That's a better way of putting this. You own these things anyway. You're just not using them. And because you were trained to think you shouldn't use them or couldn't use them, that somebody was going to leave you, you've buried them out in the backyard of your being. And you wonder why you're unhappy. You have to say what's true. I've also, this comes out in little ways too. I thought this is a great deal of fun when I'm in a situation like this. You know, I'm a corporate coach. And when I am teaching people how to sell well, right, I'll always make sure that somebody, if they're role-playing, gives them trouble. And so they'll say, here's a client, and here's the person they're role-playing with. And, of course, I've coached the person they're role-playing with. And the person says, this, let's say the CEO of the company says, Well, thank you so much for coming by. I didn't have a chance to call, but we've already gone with another company. And I see these dear people who've come to me for help go, okay, yes, well, that's good. Okay. That's good? Yes. Excuse me? That's self-sabotage, guys. You should say what's true. Well, I'm certainly disappointed in that. Can you tell me why you went to this other company instead of going with mine? So I can improve in some way this whole experience? I'd like to know that, wouldn't you? Be careful what you say. Be careful what you think. Because in the most minute ways, we are sabotaging ourselves. And there's a nice little minute way you're sabotaging yourself. When you are validating something that isn't true for you. Why would you do that? To be liked? If there's a people-pleasing element here, we have to get that out. Because you can't please everybody. You're a nice person. What I try to do in that situation is make them feel so bad because they like you so much about not going with you that as soon as the other person doesn't work out, they will go with you. I would use it to enhance the reputation so that they say, this other person is really wonderful. And they might give your name to somebody else. I'm sorry I didn't go with so-and-so. They say to a friend of theirs or another CEO. Guys, there are all sorts of choices out there that the ego child's mind does not let you see. Because to the ego child's mind, they have no option but the one they've always done as a child. That's people-pleasing. That's placating. That's being afraid that they'll be abandoned or disliked. I believe, guys, in being nice, but I do believe in telling the truth. Ms. Carbone goes on to say, you feel bad about yourself when you are not focused on pleasing others. So you do what is right for them, not what is right for yourself. Another way that this comes out is when you ride on somebody else's life. If you're afraid to do your own. I have a dear friend who goes along with everything that any of us say instead of saying, well, I don't want to do that. Or I've seen that movie. She even went to a movie with some other friends that she'd seen before. What? We never knew it. Or they didn't know it. I found out in a session. What? Why'd you do that? Oh, no problem to see it again. I mean, I liked it. All right. But what could you have created with that 2 or 3 hours? What could you have done that really gave you pleasure? Now, guys, of course, as loving people, we do things for people. But this is a problem because you're doing things for people at the expense of yourself. That's the problem. Certainly, there are things that we do for others, and then we either take care of ourselves afterwards, or together you all do something that you both want to do or that you want to do then. But this sacrificing yourself over and over and over again because, well, why not? I don't matter is not going to work. And it is self-sabotage. Let's call it what it is. And you won't be happy doing that. Who are you? What do you want to do? What do you want to do in this moment? And I had a dear client of mine who said at one point she had this light bulb go on over her head, and she said, "You mean the literal moment, don't you?" It was like, yeah, I mean the literal moment. Right now, what do you want? What would help fulfill you? That's the consideration of self. And it has to be in place for a happy life. You understand? What do you need right in this moment? It was interesting because she went on to say, I don't know what I need. I don't know what I need. Now, this is somebody who stays on the surface and who spins around on the surface. Very histrionic, very dramatic, looks like she's feeling, keeps her out of feeling. You see, that's what histrionics do. They don't let you really take the dive. And where do you think the information is? In the dive. It's down here in a lower level of you. But if you're spinning around on the top, what? This is a big ditherer, this woman. She was. Big ditherer. Do you understand dithering? Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I do that one? Oh, what? Should I? Keeps you all on the surface. Not where the answers lie. Go down, go down, go down. Sit quietly. Find out what you want to do. That's where the answers lie. So when she first came to us and all this became evident, we made sure she could go down and do this. And then she had a period of time where she forgot to do it. Back to dithering. Again, it's habit, isn't it? It's what you do to keep your mind off perhaps things that don't yet have answers. Why isn't that all right? It's all just God working out. But when we are insecure, when we are afraid, guys, we can't handle that kind of not knowing. We can't handle that. What do you think is happening on the news and on television? Somebody makes a move in politics or anything else, and pundits go crazy. And it's never about, well, here's the news and what's happening. It's about, oh, this could happen, and this could happen, and this could happen, and this could happen. Guys, all that's just some more bull. It hadn't happened. But they do like to make the news off fear. You got to wake up and listen to what what people are saying to you. You've got to decide. You've got to listen to that as information in the world and decide what you believe about it in the clear experience of self. There's so many ways we compromise and sacrifice ourselves to please others. Why please others? Why not just try to add value wherever you go? Why not you be pleased and they be pleased? Why not everybody be pleased? Why not have an easy life? Number 8. They avoid being assertive and expressing themselves. Guys, what I say is true. Beyond all this low self-esteem stuff that we have, beyond the shame that may be valid or most of the time is not, beyond all the things that we hold on to in our deepest heart of hearts as our secrets, there is something that is true. We must add value. We must express ourselves. This is not an ego expression. This is a higher self-expression. This is where your fulfillment, by the way, your potential lies. Also, I think of when I hear this, and she goes on to say, let me just read what she says. You feel that others will reject or abandon you if you express yourself or be assertive, so you passively go along with others until you build up resentment when your actual needs are not met. Yeah. Two of our universal issues is, what? You don't care about me, and I never get what I want. If you continue to believe those things, which are absolutely core issues in the ego child's mind, and every single issue you have falls under one of those headings. You don't care about me, and I never get what I want. You're not asserting yourself. You're not being who you are. And asserting yourself, again, is not dominance. It's just saying what you think. I mean, if you're talking to a normal person, I say a normal person, a person without a personality disorder, you can say in all confidence, that's wonderful. We'll have to agree to disagree on that one because I believe this instead. But, to each his own, right? You understand? Why not? You've got to realize that we spend our lives trying to change other people's mind, trying to get people to listen to us. And the fact of the matter is we don't speak up for those reasons. We want to speak up just because your voice can be added to the world. It should be added to the world in an appropriate way. And once you form who you are, not that you are forming it actively, but that you are getting out of the way the things that are interfering with that coming forth in you, i.e. issues, you find you have a great deal of expression that can be expressed in a kind and loving and sharing way. You can talk back and forth. You can entertain ideas that are not your own. You've heard me say I'm a great admirer of Pat Conroy, who went through life saying, tell me a story. Tell me a story. Very sweet. I go back to the old lesson, too, that we had on pleasure and fulfillment. Pleasure being temporary. Pleasure of a beautiful sunset is there. You can enjoy it thoroughly. When it's gone, it's gone. You see, you don't think of it again. It doesn't give you pleasure necessarily again. But gratification is where you are using some or all of yourself in some sort of pursuit, in some sort of expression of self. And that's powerful gratification. And if you do it long enough and you learn about whatever you're doing and you get good at it, it becomes some real fulfillment when you sit down and do that. It's using all of what you are, your wisdom and your smarts. They're different things. Your ideas about life, some events that have happened, you use them. I know, I'm speaking to myself as a writer. Guys, there's something like that in you. Go for it. Number 9, they avoid failure, judgment, or rejection. You can't avoid those things, guys. It's just part of life. But if you've never learned to deal with them in a higher self way, you cope by fantasizing, by the avoidant personality disorder, in a lot of different ways, by isolating and keeping yourself away from people. Ms. Carbone goes on to say, you easily give up on yourself. You don't have to face the feelings of rejection, confront your fear of failure, and deal with perceived judgment. Yeah. But you should be able to do that. You see? You've got to learn to do that. So the ego child's mind is now saying, oh my God, if I learn to do that, there'll be so much I can't handle it. And I'm saying the sheer fact that you start learning how to do that and deal with that is the surefire way not to bring that in. because it's coming in because there's an emptiness in you and you don't know how to deal with it. So here it comes. Gives you the challenge to do it. If you already know how to do it, there's no need for any more challenge energetically. Don't you understand? People fantasize too, rather than face failure, judgment, or rejection. They fantasize everything's going to be great. They've won the Academy Award before they've taken an acting class. Whatever we're going to do, and we're going to do well, is going to require some hard work. The interesting thing about this is I've met many people who do not want to expend the effort on their own behalf. If you're one of those people, you've learned a severe lesson in the ego child's mind, which is you're not good enough, there's a shame there, there's something, infinite things to get through there, the big ones, you will, and you'll start moving out of that. You'll understand what they are. Because if you're in fantasy to avoid failure, judgment, or rejection, if you're in the avoidant personality to avoid those things, how are you going to learn anything? The lessons are in those things for us. Don't you get it? The lessons are there. You learn a lesson. Here's what happens. When we fail in some way, we look at, well, what could I do? How could I redo this? Right? Many people just hide away from their failure and they imagine a better world, and then you never get the lessons. You never see what you can do and change and tweak a little bit so that you get a different result. Guys, this is about learning here. This is not a pronouncement on your being, you're a failure. This is about you failed this one time. Let's figure out what you did so you won't fail again. Stop judging yourself so harshly. Let's learn the lesson. Stop running away from rejection like it's a bad little boy trying to pinch you in school. Come on, kids. Is it really rejection? If you've learned something from that, that's going to make your life better in the future. I go back to saying, to that story. I think I've told you this once before. I had a client years ago who was in logistics, and she was a woman. Back then, I don't still know how many women there are in logistics. I'd like to think there are a lot of women out there, but the truth was she was one of the few women in logistics. She got a big client. Big. This is huge. Biggest client she ever had. It is big. And they wanted another concern to work with her and, make whatever it was happen. She said, sure. So she did her part. They did their part. And it all went to hell in a handbasket because they didn't do their part. They didn't come through. She should have been watching them. It never occurred to her to watch them. It never occurred to her that her reputation was going to go south because she didn't watch them. Okay? So, she heard, they got fired. She heard through the grapevine that the head, the CEO or whoever he was, the company that hired her, was bad-mouthing her behind her back. And she came to me and she said, I've got to get out of logistics. I failed. This is horrible. And I said, well, I don't really believe no is no until it's no. So I said, why don't you do something else? Why don't you send them a huge gift basket and a note? And you can tell what mind she's in when I tell you what she said to me, because she said, what do I get out of that? Whoa. And I said, well, with that attitude, absolutely nothing. Because you're in the ego child's mind. Now, if you can join me in the higher self mind, we'll see what happens. So I wrote a note for her. I dictated it to her, and it was something along the lines of, I want to thank you so much for the hardest lesson I've ever learned in my life. This was excruciating, and I am well aware of what I should have done and did not do to cause all this, to create all this with this other company. I want you to know that I am going to be a better person for it. I'm going to apply everything that I have learned in this terrible experience to anybody else I work with and help through the years. And I can't thank you enough for this incredible gift you've given me. Enjoy the gift basket. And as soon as she sent that, and she had to get in the right frame of mind, because if she sent it as a manipulation, man, would this have backfired. People know what you're doing when you manipulate them. They may allow you to manipulate them, but not somebody like that, right? And that's not healthy, by the way, if it did go down that way. But she got in the highest self mind, and what she said was true. That afternoon, he called her and he hired her. She's been working with him ever since. Who are you? What are your options? If the child thinks there are no options, failure, judgment, and rejection, you're just the victim. Well, you're not. Okay. Number 10. People who self-sabotage engage in self-destructive coping behaviors. She goes on to say you don't feel worthy of love or deserving of the things you want in life, so you don't put the effort into going for what you really want. You do the opposite and work against yourself. She goes on to say you find a way out, an escape route, so your life goes nowhere. To avoid the emptiness of living an unfulfilled life, you end up looking for distractions and ways to get instant pleasure. By the way, many people have affairs because of that. Nice distraction, huh? You can get instant pleasure so you can feel better than focus on yourself. To cope with feeling unhappy within yourself, it can be better to engage in self-defeating and self-destructive behaviors, such as addictions and affairs, so that you don't have to face these feelings within yourself. Whew, that's never going to work, kids. Never, never, never. So, what are some coping mechanisms that you ought to look at? Well, drinking, drugging. I'm going to tell you now, you can listen to all my radio programs, but if you are smoking pot, you're going to stay exactly where you are. You just will. I know I am offending a lot of people out there in the drugging community. I do believe in medical marijuana. When you need it, have it. But you've got to need it. And this is a drug that is going to not allow you to expand. It actually keeps you where you are. I really believe that. Smoking. Isolating yourself, withdrawing from your community, fantasizing, gossiping, judgment, self and judgment of other people. All of that, guys, is self-destructive coping behavior. There's a healthy version of just about everything, you know? And you have to learn to deal. You have to learn to live in the world. You need a coach sometimes to help you do that. We're not born knowing those things, kids. There's nothing wrong with you at all, except it's time to learn it, and we're criticizing ourselves instead for not knowing. You're not supposed to know until you know. It's all a game. It's all a manipulation. Do you get it? you have, in addition to the coping behaviors inside of you that you so choose, you have everything you need to live a better life. You've got tools that you are not using. You're not aware of them yet. Let's find out what you're doing and give you different tools. And guys, at least in my program, there's not any judgment here. I had a man come to me years ago who cheated at cards. He was in high stakes games. And I guess, thought I was going to judge him. I said, no, I'm going to get you past why you have to do that. But you're going to do it until you stop, which he did. He stopped ultimately. So my job is just to take away unhealthy beliefs. And what's left, not emptiness, kids, but who you really are, without all the pretense and the coping and the things that are not healthy for you anymore. Everything helps along the way. It makes us who we are until we're ready to become something else. You're listening to the show because it's time to think more global thoughts about everything, to start seeing your life as the perfect whole, and that not one moment has been wasted, not one moment was an accident, not one moment was a mistake. It was just steps along the way. Now we're talking about accepting your humanness. And your divinity is in that, by the way. So number 11, we're almost finished, 17 minutes. Can I do 2 more in 17 minutes? Time me. Okay. They say people that self-sabotage seek vengeance to feel better. If you're angry at your boss for raising your work performance, it can feel better to get back at him, her, by leaving your job. So you self-sabotage yourself. You feel rejected by your partner and seek vengeance by cheating on them. You end up sabotaging your marriage and family in order to escape the feelings of loneliness. Discharging your anger might feel better in the moment, but it can work against you in the long run. Every single one of these feels better in the moment, right? It's what I said in the beginning, short-term fix or long-term gain, your choice. These are choices. Vengeance. People are cruel. Sometimes, really. There are all sorts of people with all sorts of mental illnesses. And sometimes it's just better to walk away. I think this is something to consider. What are you doing? If you carry vengeance in your heart and unforgiveness, you are carrying a connection to that person or that institution or whoever done you wrong. Okay? Certainly, I believe that, hello, here we are again. Schnitzel, the kid. He is here every week, isn't he? Yeah. All right. Certainly, I believe that here's what I want to do. I want you to think clearly. I want you to not be working out of your issues. I want you to think about impact that vengeance and revenge has on your family and on your community and on you. And I'm not saying walk away every time. I'm not saying sue the hell out of them every time. I'm not saying hurt them back in some way. I am saying that these are very intense calls that you make from the highest self so you can live with the outcome. You want to think, feel, and act from the perspective of the healed person. Or are you being the child who just wants? And they did you wrong. There's also something here I want to put on the table, and that is I often find a belief in people that life should be fair. Kids, that's not true. Life is not fair in many cases. Not fair the way the ego child's mind thinks. So, do you want everything to be fair and spend your life trying to make everything fair? Or do you want to be over here creating the life you want? Thank you, darling. Or do you want to be over here creating the life you want and not having anything stop you except for you? Can you see it's a different use of energy? Life isn't fair. Let's accept that. Life isn't fair, but you're creating the life you want. So what do you want to do? What do you want next? Where do you want to be? Who you want? What do you want to open in you? Let's keep going. Keep going. That's the journey, not trying to make everything fair. That's a little girl, little boy belief. Okay. And that's where a lot of times vengeance and unforgiveness come from. Number 12, we are at the end. Self-sabotaging people self-punish and berate themselves. She goes on to say, you might not feel good enough inside. Well, nobody cares about me. If nobody cares about me, I don't care about myself. I mean, there's the pathological extension of that core belief. I never get what I want. Because of some of these limiting ego child's mind beliefs, we don't feel good enough inside. So we put up with abusive partners because you believe you don't deserve any better. And you remember what I'm talking about with deserving. There's no such thing. There's no such thing. You are a child of God. You just are that. What's this deserving business about? You've got everything you need. You're just not using it. That's what most people do. They just don't use it. They're just not going past the shallower levels of energy to take that dive into who they really are as the aspect of the ascended God you are. That's where your happiness lies. Then you use those talents and gifts and abilities that come up then. Oh my God, that's the potential. That's the fulfilled life. And it doesn't stop at any point. You don't just punch yourself over the goal line and you're done. There's more and more and more to discover about yourself from the inside out. She goes on to say you might blame yourself, find fault in yourself by punishing yourself and beating yourself up, by attacking yourself. Yes, everything is a self-attack. You understand what I'm talking about. As I said, going back to failure, here's the problem with self-punishing and berating yourself. You didn't just fail in this one aspect in time, in this one thing. Oh no, you're a failure. It's a pronouncement on your life. Angelica has just shared something with us. She says, I'm trying to make all fear. She says, trying to be perfect, and that's a heavy weight. Oh, yeah. We're not perfect, darling. The perfection of God lies in our imperfection. Do you understand that? I mean, that's a really important one. When I say nobody accepts who we are as human. We all make mistakes. We all make mistakes. It's not any of us that escape that. Okay? Big ones, little ones, and everything in between, we all do it. So, what is this perfection business? There's no such thing except in our own minds, which is the problem. We must accept the fact that we're all human and we're all imperfect, and we give that to God, and then that higher self opens, and we start making choices from that aspect, because that's who we really are trying to be in our perfection. Problem is, it's human perfection. There's no such thing. There's absolutely no such thing. We must give up our ideas of being perfect. That's ridiculous. And celebrate who we are as human beings and what we've done. Because what we do when we try to be perfect is we are not accepting what we've done. Therefore, there's no learning experience there because we're too busy denying what we've done. We want to be perfect. Depression comes from that and a lot of other things, Thomas. Suppose nothing's wrong with you at all. Suppose you're just human, like everybody else. Suppose now it's time to accept that and listen to the ascended God you are in each moment and honor yourself and others and go forward. It's an easier life than we're making it. She goes on to say, self-sabotaging protects you from feeling worthless, so you end up acting out of the actual self-defeating behaviors that reinstates this feeling. You see, every time you use your issues, you convince yourself you need to use them, and they are in the opposite direction from the ascended God you are and who you are open to becoming. That's why you're listening to a show like this. So it's like sending you in the wrong direction. You've convinced yourself you need to do the things you do that are self-punishing and berating yourself. Some religions have even taught us to do that. You know, my most grievous fault. Remember that? Oh, yeah. Oh, please. I think there's been enough berating. I think there's been enough self-punishment. When is the end of that? There is none. Not until you wake up and replace it with something else. Moving from the ego child's mind to the highest self mind. If I ask you, has everything been your fault? Part of you says, no, I know that is not true. Part of you says, oh, yes, yeah, well, that's the self-attack. It's completely inappropriate now. You've got something else to do other than self-attack. Self-attacking is never the truth. Self-attacking kind of occurs when we change the verb. Instead of, I have an issue with, instead of saying, I made a mistake, let's say that one. I made a mistake. We change the verb. I am a mistake. Instead of, I carry a heavy burden. I am the burden. That's self-attack. There are a million ways that people self-attack. You've got to stop that. It's only about this moment. Stop self-attacking so you can learn something from this precious and sacred moment. It's never going to come again. Do you understand that? This moment will never come again. And you go make the most of it. Understand what's going on in that moment. You can admit that you have a problem with this or that. You can also admit in that same sentence that you're open now to surrendering it and having it something else replace it, something lovely and of God and of the higher self. Thank you for listening. We are at 4 minutes until the end. What I'd like very much to do is take time to pray for you and pray for us all. Okay. Dear God, who is all there is, you who are all we are and all everything is, we thank you so much for the opportunity to be together, to ease our stuckness in old ways and patterns of thinking and being. We ask now that we surrender whatever it is that we can surrender, whatever we'll let go of, in whole or in part, that we may see more clearly, that we may turn on the light in the dark rooms we've been standing in, that we may see that it's all perfect. We're not, but it is. This divine system of you. We're so grateful, dear God. Show us, let us understand in the next few days, let it surface in us what our next step is and our next. And give us courage to act on ourselves as who we are, as the aspect of the ascended God. This is our gift. And we're ready to do right by it, whatever that means to us. And we say this in your name, dear God, in the name of the Ascended Masters, our love-centered guides and friends, and in the name of each and every person listening to this show today. And thank you, Angelica. Very sweet. Good Sunday to you too, and to all. God bless you. I'll see you next week, okay?